Welcome to Settling is Bullshit, a sweary podcast about claiming your joy. If you are an adult human craving healthier boundaries, a greater sense of purpose, or an increased capacity to feel at ease in your own skin, then you are in the right place, my friend. I'm your host, Kate Blauk, and I'm here to offer you practical tools and playful encouragement to help you step forward and be your most awesome self. My hope is that each episode will leave you feeling a bit more empowered to make brave choices and claim your joy. Hello, friend. Today's episode is about love and partnership and not settling for bullshit, even if it takes a really goddamn long time to find what you're actually looking for. My guest is Lisa Lewis-Cogswell. She is a connection coach, facilitator, and experience designer who lives in the Sierra foothills in California. She helps individuals forge meaningful and authentic relationships by transforming unconscious patterns into heart-opening experiences that lead to more connection, love, and trust. Lisa's journey to finding her husband is a decades-long hunt full of magic and manifestation, and I'm really excited to have her on to share it with you today. Well, Lisa, I am so excited to be here with you today and to hear your story of not settling in love, because I know for me, I need to hear this story, and I don't imagine that I'm alone in that.
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there who settle for less than what they deserve. Yeah,
Absolutely. We've known each other in sort of various coach training capacities. And so I've heard little bits of this story, but I'm really excited to kind of get the big full version and to share it with listeners. So you have a big, beautiful love story to share with us today.
Yes, and thank you for finally. So great to be here with you, Kate. You're so fun, and I love that I'm sharing this story on here because I've been asked to share it for years in a bigger way, and I share it with people one on one when I can kind of hear it might resonate for them. You know, I definitely am. Maybe I guess I would say a good example of what can happen when you don't settle for less than what it is you want in relationship. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so to spoiler alert, right? Lisa is very gloriously, joyfully, happily married to the man of her dreams, as I understand it. And that's been quite a journey to get there.
Yeah. And I mean, another disclaimer, like all relationships are work and have their ups and downs, right? And we hit our hardest part actually right after the quote honeymoon phase. We hit all of our stuff, but it was because of the things that happened in the beginning that reminded me, okay, this is my life partner. I need to hang in there. There were all the signs that this is the person. So don't flee. Hang in there a little bit. But we've been together now since 2011. So pretty long time. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I know in your work, you really dive into kind of relationships and cultivating love and being heart-centered. Your business is called Heart Space Rising.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because even back before I met him, I was in graduate school at the time at this spiritual psychology school. I was in a PhD program, but I ended up getting pregnant and getting a master's degree and going and being a mom at that point. But yeah, I was writing my dissertation on spiritual partnership and relationship as a spiritual path. And that's kind of always been my jam. I'm all about how to build more love in the world, more connection, more trust. And especially right now, we're in this horrible place in the world of tipping point, but also beautiful place in the world of potential and possibility, right?
Yeah.
For people to open their hearts to each other. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. So graduate program in spiritual partnership. I would love to hear more about that.
Okay. So it was transpersonal psychology, spiritual psychology program. Yeah. And it's funny because my husband and I didn't know each other back then, but we were both in similar kinds of programs and we were kind of circling around each other in life. We found this out later. Literally, we were in the same place at the same time at times. And we like retraced our life. Wait a minute. In that year you were there, you were in Sedona, like I was there too. And wait a minute. Okay, a psychic actually told me that my soulmate was here. I remember that back then, 17 years ago, you know.
Oh,
So
wow.
we definitely were kind of in the same circles. And back then I was into all kinds of like exploring spirituality. I was in my young 20s and just looking for the right spiritual path, and always knew that I would end up with someone who would resonate with being on a journey and growth and personal development and things like that. So, like I said, I actually ended up having a child. I did not get married. I knew that
Okay.
I knew that it was the wrong person, and this is sort of on the theme of not settling. My whole family had been divorced, and I just had watched so many people in horrible marriages that I knew it could easily be that way, and I decided to be a single mom instead of getting
Yeah.
married. So that was a big decision, right?
Yeah, what was that decision-making process like? I imagine that was really a
Oh,
lot.
good question. I think it's like when you grow up seeing certain things in your life, like seeing bad relationships. I saw my mom always kind of like very dependent on having a man to be happy, but not necessarily the right men. And I know I made a conscious and probably unconscious, now that I've learned so much about trauma, decision to just be alone rather than be with the wrong person.
Mm,
So I went into this kind of hyper independence, which it is a trauma response, right? um,
yeah.
but that left me kind of in this, like, I'm an independent woman, I don't need a man kind of energy. And then I was alone for many years, sometimes dating, but I never wanted to settle. And that was like my motto. I was like, I'm not going to get married just to get married. I would see women do that and like, okay, I got to have the kids, clock is ticking. And they would kind of follow that journey, and then it would not end well, usually. I
Yeah.
didn't have anyone around me that was having what I would call like a conscious, relationship where the purpose of coming together was to like grow and become better human beings, you know?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. That sounds like a
So,
really yummy relationship paradigm.
right. Yeah. And when you have that paradigm, it kind of limits your pool, because a lot of people, especially in their 20s and 30s, are on a path of kind of something else. And I was alone, I was lonely, I was sometimes dating, but I knew that I wanted a relationship where I would feel a certain way and live a certain way, and it wasn't matching that conventional narrative. So
Yeah.
I did a lot of things during, I'd say, mostly during my late 20s and 30s. I did a lot of things to kind of put out the intention and the message and the vibe of what I wanted to create.
Feeling were you looking for in relationship that you didn't
Mm,
find?
that's a good question. I think it's, like everyone wants to feel like they can be their authentic self, and
Mhm.
also to align and have similar goals and values of what it is you're here to do in this world. And I always knew that I needed to be with a partner who would be along that with me. So I kind of had this sense of like, I knew my husband was, into holistic health and nutrition. I knew he was like a spiritual guy. I knew I could feel him, I knew he
Mm.
loved nature like me. And so, yeah, there was a lot about him that I kind of felt already. And so, part of the practices I would do back then just involved a lot of feeling into that feeling of what I wanted to be in. And, sometimes like some prayer or ceremony around that. And that ends up showing up later when we met. Like funny things happened when we finally met.
So, like, yeah, how long was that? I mean, at what point did you kind of feel, okay, I have this partner out there, I have this sort of sense of him? How old were you when like that became clear? And then how long did it take to actually get there?
Yeah, so I was getting really clear on that in my 30s, still holding to this motto of I'm not going to settle, but I'm also like alone and getting discouraged by dating by like my early 40s. I had gone through periods of time where I would just not date at all and just be alone, be okay with that kind of, but
Mhm.
lonely. By my early 40s, I was dating and even heartbroken because I had just been with a narcissist, which was a very interesting experience of, being kind of eroded from within.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting is one way to put it.
Yeah, so I was recovering from that, and then, I had been, like, doing the online dating apps. There was no swiping at that time, thank God. I don't think I could have lived through the
It's
swipe.
It's pretty terrible. Like, it has absolutely gamified human in like, connection, and it's
Ugh.
demoralizing for sure.
Yeah, I'm very grateful that I didn't have to make that choice because I'm not sure I could have done it, and I would have had to meet him some other way, but back then, it was just online dating, and it was still it was still getting pretty popular, so I did that, but I would, like, turn it on and then turn it off. I would date people, get really discouraged, like, "Oh my god, this is too much work. I can't do this." I would turn it off, and just starting to get into this rut of, like, kind of giving up, and then I fully turned it off, and the way the story starts to go on this, and this is after years of doing this intention work and prayer and really knowing a lot about him and really doing a lot of like inner work around making the list, the list everybody talks about, make your list of like everything you want in someone and what the deal breakers are and what you have to offer, right? And I had this
Yeah.
list, and like this happened later after I met him. We were cleaning the garage out one time when we were about to move, and I found that list and I handed it to him and I said, "Look, it's you."
Aw.
Yeah.
So before we get to the, like,
Yeah.
beautiful unfolding of the meet cute, like, how did you navigate those years? Like, how did you hold on to that hope?
Yeah, I think it was like it was really staying tuned into knowing he was out there and just getting a real sense of this person exists. I'm not just making this up in my head. And so it really is a leap of trust and surrender to even keep believing that and to keep dating and people who are like clearly not that and go on sometimes side journeys of like, oh, this seems fun. And then being like, okay, it's back to the
Yeah, so was that kind of how you if you had sort of this, like, clear sense of, like, okay, this person is out there, and then you would go on side quests with other people, was it usually like, "Well, this isn't really it, but it could be fun for a while?" Is that kind of the vibe
yeah,
that would
yeah.
happen?
Yeah, really fun and sometimes destructive, especially to my self-esteem. But yeah, it's like that.
Yeah. Yeah, can relate. I can relate to all of this. For listeners, part of the reason I'm excited to have Lisa on is because what she is describing is where I am in my journey prior to meeting my person. So this is going to be great. It's going to be great. This is a story of hope and triumph.
Yeah, I would say there was 2 things that I would usually feel in dating the not right people. It was either I was bored and not very interested and just sort of like, I'd rather just be home alone right now than just kinda going through the motions." I would feel that, or it was something really exciting and fun, but it felt more like an addiction, right? Like a roller coaster ride, and that didn't feel, like, healthy, and I knew that wasn't what I was looking for. So the point at which it all started changing was when I will say, I feel like I clearly remember a big surrender from my
Mhm.
heart. It was after being really discouraged and after kind of feeling like it was sort of like giving up, but it was also filled with this sense of trust and letting go. And it was, okay, I've been alone so long, I'm gonna actually be okay. It can just be like me and God, spirit, whatever your belief system is, like, I'll be okay doing this life alone rather than being with the wrong person. And I'm okay with that. And I kind of just like I turned the online dating off. I went on this vacation with my family in Santa Cruz, which was about an hour away. And I was sitting on the beach every day, and, like, this one day, the dolphins there was, like, a whole bunch of dolphins jumping around in the ocean, and they were just frolicking and just jumping around, and I looked out there, and I was, like, sort of communicating with them on some level. I was like, "Oh, man, that's so fun what you're doing, like, you're so full of joy. I want that. I want that kind of playful partnership." And I just gave him a little bit of a nudge. I was like, "Go find him for me." I was still, like, believing he was out there, and I was telling these dolphins to go find him for me. And then so finish up that vacation with my family. I come home without any thought of that. I just sort of felt inspired to turn my online dating back on. These are the kinds of signs, signals, and synchronicities that start to happen when you're kind of in flow. So because I had surrendered, I was just like, oh, what do I have to lose? I turned it back on and I added some things to my profile that were true about me that I kind of had held back. And I also expanded my reach of like how far I would go to meet somebody, which ended up including where my husband lived, Santa Cruz, which is where I was just on vacation.
Mm.
So we met online. He lived in Santa Cruz. And on our second conversation that we had on the phone, we hadn't even met in person yet, but we had figured out all the ways in which we were in kind of similar communities and just a lot of same interests. He's walking along the beach in Santa Cruz and he's walking along and he stops and he said, "Oh, I wish you could see this. The dolphins, they're just jumping around in the ocean right now. They look so much
Mm.
like they're having so much fun." And I said, "Wait a minute, what beach are you on?" And so he was on the beach, like literally right where I sat, and I did that. And it just kind of like hit me. I have this belief system that actually, says that those kinds of things will start showing up when you're on the right path. And so it was a big directional signal to me to like, oh, this could be him. And then it was like, oh my God, I can't say this to him, right? Like I just met the guy. So I'm not going to tell him that story. And then and then a lot of them started happening. I think at one point I counted 20 of them. um,
Wow.
Another kind of cute one was he showed up on our second date with this item in his hand, and I'll just say that it was an item that I always had in my little, like, ceremonies that I would do where I would, like, try to manifest him.
Mm.
A very specific item, and he shows up at the door with it in his hand, and I said, "Why are you holding that?" And he said, "I have no idea."
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so, like, thing after thing after thing happened like that, and it was to me that meant I'm on the lit path here. Like the signals are saying this is the person. Hang in there because it was great, but it also, like I said, soon after the honeymoon period, we hit our stuff, and it's like we could have just, the relationship could have ended, but I had all these signs that I was in the right
Mm.
place with the right person. And we made it through that period and, it's great. He's exactly who I was manifesting and we reworked through a lot of that stuff. Things still come up. We still work on our things together, but to this day we both have very specific practices that we do to work on to go inside, to work on our patterns, to stay in the heart space, right? Speaking of heart space rising.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I met him in person. And we had our first date, and it was just like, electric from the beginning. But it was the first time I had felt the combination all being right, like not just chemistry, but also the compatibility and just the shared values and all the things that I knew would be necessary for a long term partnership, especially with someone who I wanted to have a spiritual partnership with, right? Yeah.
Yeah. What does spiritual partnership mean to you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can tell you what it means to us now. It probably meant different things slightly as I was growing up and as I was, I thought I was so wise in my 20s.
Yeah, well,
I,
you were describing this like 20-year-old Lisa that I was like, dang, you were way more connected with yourself than I was in my 20s.
yeah, I thought I was really wise. I realize now that I totally wasn't, but I think now I do have some wisdom. And I think now the way I would say it is that we're both aligned that our purpose in life is to be connected with what might be described by some people as God, the divine, Tao, and to live our lives from that place and in service to others. And it's kind of aligning like our consciousness with our true self, with our heart, like living from that place is where we're at now. And it's so beautiful to get to that with somebody. And I always like to say we've gone through a lot too. It hasn't been just a joyride along the way, but it all was worth it.
Yeah. What were some of the things that helped you, like, identify, this is not it?
when I was, like, dating people.
Yeah, prior to finding
Mm.
your spiritual partnership that you've been looking for, right? Because I think it's so easy to get, like, it can be really hard to hold on to hope. It can really be hard to hold on to that belief that, like, something better is out there, and, like, do not want to, nor can I, like, settle for this thing.
First of all, I would say that it being able to be yourself around somebody and feel safe. Now, I have to say, there's definitely things that can be triggers that make you feel unsafe that come up in relationships. But in general, if somebody is your match, it should be kind of not easy in the sense that you don't come across patterns, but easy in the sense that you don't feel like you're chasing them or that they have to
Mhm.
chase you. It's like you're meeting each other, like, before I met my husband, the person I had dated before, like, there would be the ghosting and the panic and the fear when there'd be, like, no response, and then I was dating my husband, and it's like, okay, now I have somebody who's, like, literally telling me when they're gonna go off grid for a while so I don't worry that they're not responding, you know? It's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay."
Yeah, it's only in the last few years that I've dated people that have done that, and it's just so much nicer. It's so soothing to be like, "Oh, you recognize that when you disappear, it doesn't feel good to me, and you're letting me know that you're not just vanishing into the ether," because that's totally a thing in the modern era.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't say that I know what the dating world is like right now, but I think there is some sort of ease and naturalness to it, even though patterns will come up, fear will definitely come up, right? Because we all fear that, oh my gosh, when something feels like it's right, I think it's natural human response to fear the threat of losing that thing, right? So we go into that, and then that triggers parts of our brain that make us behave in ways that aren't great, you know?
Yeah. I do. I am actually quite familiar with attachment theory and how all of that shows up in relationship.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But if with all of that coming up for people, I think there's something that just keeps drawing you back together in a more natural way, especially when there's a bigger purpose to the relationship. And the opposite of that is what I would feel with other people. Everything from like boredom to I don't know, just like, oh, this is just not right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
trusting that. And you can decide to play around with that for a while. Like, I remember one guy that I was with where like literally when I met him, I was like, I told my girlfriend we were at a concert. I was like, I should walk the other direction right now. Like, I know this is
Mm.
bad news.
Yeah. And then what happened?
You're like, and then what happened? It was bad news. And
Yeah.
it was how long was that? 9 months or whatever, and it was fun and exciting and not great. Like,
Yeah.
being with someone like that just makes you question, "How did I let someone treat me that way?" And, all the
Yeah.
things you think you've built up in yourself, and then suddenly you're with a total narcissist. So
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you so part of my kind of paradigm is that, like, we end up in all of these relationships, because we have something to learn or to heal, or that, like, it's going to up level us so that we're ready for the next thing. So
Mhm.
what do you think you took away from that kind of narcissist experience?
Well, actually, to his credit, he said to me, "You need to be with a much nicer guy." And at the time,
Hmm.
I didn't agree with him because I was having fun and he wasn't, always very nice to me. And I'm very sensitive and I'm, at that time was still very emotionally reactive. I have that still happen, but less so now. So, yeah, he was kind of right. I mean, I ended up with someone who is one of the kindest people I've ever met. Sometimes when you date people who are just so wrong for you, it's just showing you something you need to learn about yourself or some part of you need to experience so you can get to the root of what that is, that
Yeah.
pattern. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you get to the root?
There's a lot of modalities out there to do this. So it's a bigger answer. But working in the body and the unconscious on those things is really important because a lot of those, that's where it sits. That stuff sits in the unconscious. And it's things like, people pleasing or avoiding, hiding, patterns like that, that can also hide other patterns, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's the inner work that takes us a lifetime. And the more we do it, the more we start to uncover what's blocking our heart from opening to love. It also helps
Mhm.
us to trust more and to not be so reactive. I know, like, so much of my 20s, 30s, 40s, I mean, up until just very recently, I was a very emotional, sensitive, and reactive person, really. And I'm only now really sort of feeling like I can identify before that happens more. And like those little saboteurs that want to come up and like destroy some things to keep you safe. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think it's a big quest to go into pattern work and the unconscious and trauma work, and there's a lot of people doing really good stuff on that. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that process like for you? What were kind of some of the things that just like had to get uprooted before you could be ready to meet your person?
Yeah, so being fiercely independent doesn't really go along with being in relationship, right?
Uh-huh.
And until recently, I was even still working on that one. But like making space for someone in your life is a big deal. I think a lot of people think they're ready, but knowing that that's going to take time and work and communication and like suddenly, sitting like on the phone. I'm saying on the phone. Does anybody get on the phone anymore? Uh,
I mean, I do. I'm a late millennial, early millennial. I don't know. But like I still use the phone.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, suddenly like when you're in a relationship, and you're deepening it and you're growing together, you're spending a lot of time together, and it takes a lot of consistency. It's not like when you meet maybe like there was an analogy somebody I know who's a friendship expert. She was talking about it in terms of friendship. She's like, when you meet someone that you want to date, it's not like you just meet them like you had a great date and you're like, "Okay, great. I'll see you in like 3 months." No, you're gonna that's what a lot of
right?
people do when they're trying to build friendship. They don't like the consistency is important,
Yeah.
right? You gotta
Yeah.
start, like, spending a lot of time together because you need to deepen and build that trust and know who this person is, right? Yeah. So I would say the biggest thing that shifted for me or the biggest thing I did to shift that pattern was just making room in my life, even on a symbolic level. I literally made space in my closet. I made space on the side of the bed that this is where this person's going to be sleeping, like just putting
Yeah.
things around that symbolically represented somebody coming into my life was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long, like when you started that practice, like when did you make the
You're
space?
like, how long did this take?
Well, kind of. I mean, well, like in the sense of, I think it can be so easy for those of us who are in the grind to like lose the perspective that if we're trying to not settle, right? If we're really deciding to live by the principle of I want genuine, nourishing spiritual partnership, and I do believe that that is out there for me, but like fucking A, I've been making these lists and checking them twice for
Yeah.
like a decade or whatever.
Yeah.
I find it so helpful to have that sense of perspective,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Of and especially because like I am pretty woo and in the manifestation space and whatever, it can be easy to like hope for sort of instant results, right? Of, oh, I'm gonna do this ceremony and I'm gonna like clear out the side of my dresser and then like, oh, like 3 months later I'm gonna have a partner.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what I can say to you is those things do work. I'll give
Yeah.
you another piece of the 20 synchronicities that showed up within 2 weeks of meeting this person. He was like on his own little kind of self-guided retreat or something, and he went to a place randomly where I had done ceremony before for my partner, and I said, "Wait, where are you? Wait, where where did you go?" So, like, those things were happening, and I did a lot of that, and I definitely think it took a long time to manifest him, but I was sending mixed messages to the universe. I was like,
Mm.
"I'm gonna be a single mom, I'm just gonna do this alone, and I don't need a man." Like, I had that really implanted in me from watching my mom need a man. And those are unconscious patterns, right? That I had, like,
Yeah.
beliefs about the world that I had to start actually being courageous and take risks and date and then keep dating and then keep dating again. And, like, it's not like I could expect him to just show up to my doorstep, right? And so, for the people who are taking courageous action, inspired action, and they're making the lists and they're doing the ceremonies, or the intention at least, right? Feeling into how you want to feel with that person. I think I would say the next piece of that, and it was really key for me, is then surrendering. And don't send a mixed message. Like, don't
Yeah.
settle. Don't settle. Don't fucking settle.
Yeah, don't fucking settle, right?
Because that what that says is, I'll take less. I'm gonna ask for this. It's like going into a restaurant and ordering a hamburger, but you're like, "And I'm gonna also come over here and eat this person's salad on their plate," or something.
Right, you're like, "Yeah, like, I ordered a hamburger and you, like, brought me some chicken nuggets, and I like chicken nuggets, so I
Yeah.
guess I'll eat those, but that's, like, not really what I came here for?"
Yeah, and the chef is
Yeah.
back there making your burger, and they look out and they see you eating a whatever, and they're like, "Oh, that person doesn't need this now. They're gonna be full." So, it's just, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that means
Yeah.
sometimes you will kinda be alone, but if what you described is like being in a nourishing, like, just getting really clear on what it is you wanna feel and the kind of relationship you wanna be in, then be around that pool of people and vibes. So, for example, I knew that my husband and I would be both spiritually focused, like meditation. We're both Qigong teachers. Like, so be out there in those fields of people, you know,
Yeah.
and don't be hanging out in the bars if that's not, unless you want to meet someone who's, drinking a lot of
Hanging
alcohol.
out in the bars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
fine too, and I hung out in a lot of bars. I have nothing against bars, but that's not where my my partner was hanging out.
Yeah.
He was at
Yeah.
ashrams and stuff back in the '90s, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I was making out with a lot of people in bars in the early aughts, but that's not where I hang out anymore. Um, yeah, I love that, like, idea of well, I don't love it, but I resonate with that idea of sending the universe mixed
Mm,
messages, right?
yeah.
And the ways in which those can show up unconsciously of like, "Oh, I want partnership, but I don't have any space for a partner."
Right. Or I want partnership, but then let's just say you have an unconscious pattern of being kind of a victim, and you're just like, I want partnership, but I'm so alone, and I'm so life is so hard, and you don't have joy in your heart, right? You can't.
Mm,
It's like, find the joy that opens your heart, and then when you go out in the world, when you go out and you're in a good mood and you're kind of open, you're like a little bit more open, people smile at you and suddenly they start talking to you, and that takes courage.
yeah. Yeah, my heart just, like, when you said, like, when you don't have joy in your heart, my little heart hurt. I was like, "Oh, I know what that space is," like, that's when the, like, lonely swiping happens more often than not, is, like, we get on these dating apps. I'd say we as in me and my fellow humans who are on the, like, app mobile, that, like, so often when what we're bringing to that is that sort of, like, sad lonely.
Yeah.
And, like, of
Exactly.
course we're not attracting what we want.
Right, exactly. So one of the other sort of backdoor ways in is to get out of that and go do something that is playful or brings you joy. Like me talking to the dolphins, or something, being at the beach or whatever. And then suddenly the joy opens your heart naturally and you're in a different space. And then when you are on the app swiping, you're in a different place. And you know this because
Yeah.
you're woo woo, you're drawing in a different thing at that point, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And for anyone who's listening who's not super woo, like, this stuff still applies.
Yeah.
whether we ground it in that like the woo woo language of like energy and vibration or whatever, the mood you bring to the table is the mood you're going to attract,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So it's like, just to be on a more scientific level or even just a more practical level, if you walk into a room of people and you're like in a really bad mood, they're not going to want to like talk to you. They're going to feel you're closed off, that, suddenly, ooh, like let's avoid that. If you're feeling like you need to like close your heart or protect yourself, that's going to be felt everywhere you go. And we all know this, whether we're woo or not, we know this, right? There's certain people you're just
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't want to talk to that person. They're not available to me right now. And so
Yeah.
to become available, how do you open your heart? And I had my own process of talking to the dolphins and coming home and being in this surrendered place where I was like, all right, you know what? I'm good. I'm just going to be alone for the rest of my life. And that was the final thing. But all the other things were important too that I had done to lead up to that, being so clear that I wanted this kind of partnership. I had two different people propose to me in my life, and I did not go into that because that would have been a very sidetrack trail to what I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. How would you describe kind of the difference between like giving up and surrender?
that's such a great question. I think that giving up has like a feeling of hopelessness to it. And I probably had reached that a couple times, because I definitely tended towards a depressive side in my 20s and 30s. But this felt different. So that's why I say to people it was like giving up, but it was surrender. And it has a sense of trust in it that I'm going to be okay, and so I'm not feeling in that moment a sense of panic or loneliness. It's more like acceptance. Yeah, acceptance of what is. And what is in this moment is that I don't feel like dating and I haven't met the guy yet, even though I can totally feel him and I know he's out there. And I'm just going to accept that right now. And then somehow in that acceptance, he came right into my life at that, like a week later.
Wow.
Yeah.
God, I wish you could just like bottle that up and sell it, right? That energy of like, I'm going to hand it over and I'm going to be okay cuz like I absolutely, have had that experience in different arenas in my life, right? Of
Hmm.
just being like, okay, like I've done what I can. I'm all
Yeah.
right. And then like the thing um
I should
works
probably
itself out.
mention, because this could be a synchronicity for your show, that somebody told me today. It's the second time I've heard about this book, and I haven't read it yet, but I think it's called The Surrender Experiment by Michael
Ooh,
Singer, who wrote The Untethered Soul, which is
okay.
another really great book. So apparently it's about this, about a journey of just surrendering over and over and following the synchronicity. So there's a book
Yeah.
that I haven't even
There
read
we
yet.
go.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I am always open to book recommendations, so I will put it in my queue. Yeah. So like what have been your big learnings? So you like met your person and then you were like, "Oh my gosh, here's all of these signs that this is my person." What has that journey then been like?
Yeah. Well, it definitely gave me, I think, I tend to be, just because of my past distress and trauma and, things, we all have trauma. I just believe at this point we all have something back there in our early childhood and beyond that has caused us to not trust ourselves, not trust other people, not trust our bodies. And I definitely had big trust issues. So I can tell you that that was something I needed to learn and work on, and it definitely came up right away with Christopher, my husband. And so it was so important to have the synchronicity and the signs so I could just keep saying to myself, if I just keep doing the work, because, and that's the other thing too, is when you're in a partnership where two people are like, part of their journey here is personal development, as long as, you know, both people are doing that inner work, then there's always that like self reflection, self awareness, and growth. That was what saved us every single time, because it wasn't just me on a spiritual journey doing my work. He was doing his work too. And so we were meeting each other in that place of like, oh gosh, yeah, I did that and I did that. And, you know, continuing to grow, and it's messy a lot. Relationships are not always easy, you know? They're very hard.
Yeah.
It's much easier to be spiritually enlightened sitting, at a, retreat center.
Yeah. Yeah, and, like, what just lit up for me in listening to you, right, is that, like, partnership, as I understand it or hope for it, right, is that you're both on that spiritual
Yeah.
growth path. I've definitely been on that path myself for a long time and, like, dated a lot of people who, like, wanted to be on that path, but weren't really or didn't wanna be on the path at all, and, like, you can't be the only one doing the work.
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, a lot of relationships are that way, and I meet a lot of people on my journey who are in a marriage or a partnership where the other person's not quite into whatever they are, and it's tough, you know? And I feel like part of our journey also has been for he and I to realize that we are both kind of very similar, but also very different. You know, my spiritual journey is very different than his, even though there's some of that that we share. And just being very grateful that we share some of it, is the place I'm at now. But there's been times, of course, right? Like where I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. That's not my path. That's your path. My fiercely
Yeah.
independent part, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I was just thinking about how, like, it can be easy to fall into the trap of thinking that, I mean, we're looking for somebody who's, like, this much the same, right?
Right.
And I know in my experience and friends and clients that I've coached around dating, like, it's not about, like, having all of the same shared activities. It's the sort of, like, are your core values
Mm.
in alignment? Are what you want out of life in alignment? Like, it doesn't, like, matter that he's into rock climbing and I'm into long distance running if, like, we both care about having an active lifestyle,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, exactly. You just nailed it right there. It doesn't have to look exactly the same, although you want to be with someone that you actually enjoy spending time with, right? Like that's a whole nother
Right?
thing. I know that sounds funny to say, but there's a lot of people out there who are settling and they don't really like hanging out with their partner that much. They're always trying to get away from them, right? We like being together. And
Yeah,
that's great,
good,
like, yeah.
good.
And we don't have
Yeah.
to be together all the time. We also very much need alone time and solitude. We're both introverts, and we also process things by being alone, so that's very healthy for us both as well. But we enjoy being together, and that's another thing that to just look for after the honeymoon phase is over and all of that, and the other thing I would say too is there's some surprises along the way that when you're making your list, just be open around like some things might show up that you're like, like I never thought I would be with someone who watches sports on TV. Like that just didn't go along with my paradigm of a spiritual woodsman that my you know and my that the spiritual woodsman is a phrase that I used to say about him before I met him because other people intuitives would pick up on him and they're like, oh, he lives in the woods, which he did in the north woods of Wisconsin. And anyway, and so I meet him and suddenly he's like watching football and basketball on TV and I'm like, oh my god, how am I going to deal with this, right?
How do you deal with it,
Yeah,
Lisa?
that's a good question. So at first, right, when we were first dating, I would like watch it with him and I'm like, hmm, yeah, now we're at the point where like and he doesn't actually watch it that much, but for him it's like a childhood thing, right? He did that with his dad and there's like this whole thing about sports for him. Now I just let him do it and I'm not in the same room because I'm just like, I don't want to watch football.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's your thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and, like,
Yeah.
how kind of empowering and supportive of both of you, right? Of
Right.
to be in a partnership where it's like, he doesn't need you to watch football with him to be okay, and, like, you don't have to do the thing you don't want to do,
All right.
and the relationship can be okay.
yeah, and then we still wanna be with each other too because, we don't have so many separate activities that our lives are just completely separate, right?
Right.
We have enough shared experiences, and I think that's really important in a healthy relationship is to have separate and shared experiences that bring you joy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like the sort of tagline of the podcast, right? This is all about claiming your joy but really, like if your relationship isn't bringing you joy on the like scale of things,
Right.
right? Like nobody's perfect. We're all going to have our moments. The people we love are going to drive us bananas. But to me, the reason to be in partnership is to like inspire joy in each other,
Mm,
right?
mhm.
I mean, among other things, but like,
Absolutely, absolutely, and some people might not even know what joy feels like anymore in their life, in their partnership, in their own heart.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What is joy
Well, what
feel like?
yeah, what does joy feel like for you, Lisa?
Well, I think it's like very tied to the heart for me. So I can be feeling joy sitting, doing nothing if I'm really connected to my heart and
Mm,
my like true self and just and then like kind of an appreciation for nature, for the person I'm living with, for the place I live. Like if I start getting into the field of gratitude and appreciation, I can immediately go into joy. It's like the heart math stuff and the kind of the coherence of the heart. It's pretty easy to
mm.
go there if you just get into gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely. Gratitude is a really excellent vehicle for like finding the opportunities for joy in my life anyway.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Mm,
So I feel like this is a nice little segue, because I know the heart is very important to you, as you just said. And your coaching practice is called Heart Space Rising.
mhm,
What's the sort of story behind that name?
mm. Well, yeah, it came up with it like a year ago when I left some nonprofit work that I had been doing for many years and just decided to be an entrepreneur and start a coaching business. I just thought about like what's my end goal with everything I do in the world, and it's really to cultivate more love, connection, trust, joy, right? So that name just came to me because I was like, as you've already heard me talking about today, it's like all about the heart space for me. And the rising part, it just sort of feels like that has like movement, like creating a movement of something in the world that it's like, let's get back to the heart. Let's get back to creating community. Let's get back to finding ways to intentionally design gatherings to create connection and safety for people so they will come back out of the house after the pandemic and like let's see how we can all like go deeper, connect deeper to each other, not just the surface level, scary, awkward conversations that happen, but like, and not everybody wants a deep conversation, but I do. Like that's my
Yeah.
that's my peeps, right?
Right, same, right? Like that's like if you're not into like the big like let's go deep, then great, you can go elsewhere.
Right.
Like the world is a big place. There's lots of good
Yeah.
people. There's lots of people. We can all find our peeps. There're going to be plenty of people that do want to talk about the weather.
Right.
Um
And talking about the weather is a great way in. For me, the people that I'm gonna spend a lot of time with are like my close circle of people. If we're not going deep, I just feel like we're circling. It's like this very unsatisfying feeling like, all right, what really matters to you? What are you grappling with? What brings you joy? Like we're talking about
yeah.
here, like I want to know people on a deeper level and I want to grow together. Like let's all talk about like what we're striving for or what our mission is, what's our calling, how are we going to make this fucked up place better that we all live in? Like what are we doing to
Yeah.
change the world? That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same. Like preach. I'm into it. Um Well, awesome, Lisa. This has been lovely. What's your sort of invitation or exercise that you'd like to offer our listeners today?
Mm, yeah. So I was thinking it would be fun to just invite people to take 5 or 10 minutes to just journal about what we were talking about in terms of what an authentic and fulfilling, like deeply fulfilling relationship looks like to you and what it feels like to you, right? Like just to write about that. And that in itself, speaking from kind of a woo perspective, already creates energy into the universe, right? So then start to pay attention to the signs, the signals, the little inkling to go in that direction or the thing that shows up, especially right after you've kind of really written that out and been really clear. And then, just another invite to just if something comes up around that feels like an obstacle or a block, then to just find a way to do the inner work with someone, maybe a practitioner to get some support, to get to that root level of what's keeping you isolated or disconnected or lonely, playing it safe, right? And to just make a commitment to do what's needed and don't settle. Don't settle for being alone, but also don't settle for like, a bad relationship. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Fuck bad
Yeah.
relationships. One of the ways in which I've reframed things for myself is that like I'm really good at not staying in bad relationships.
Mm.
Like and that is a skill set of mine. Um yeah, and just that like and that's, and I want that for all of us to be true of both like romantic relationships but also friendships.
Yeah.
Right? Like we deserve to be treated well in all of our relationships and to be in connection that brings us joy.
Yeah. Yeah. And jumping out of a bad relationship is not. I mean, some people might say stay in there and learn and try, but if you know that it's not good for you and it doesn't make you feel like your true self, then you're really just kind of wasting your time. And that has lessons to it as well. That has growth. But you could also choose not to. It sounds like you're doing that, Kate. And I would imagine that's kind of lonely sometimes, but that means that you're staying clear with what it is you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lisa,
Yeah.
what brings you joy?
Let's see. Well, in this moment, what brings me joy is the community gardeners that we've created on our property that come here to
Mhm.
help us with this little micro farm that we have. We did it to build community, but it also is like more hands make many work. And
Yeah.
so planning those kind of gatherings here it brings me a lot of joy and a lot of gratitude for what we've created here in just a couple years. And then, of course, my partner and all the new journey that we're on with some new practices in working with, chi and building up certain energies in the body. That's been really profound for me too. So it in the moment, that's kind of what's coming to me. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today.
Mm.
It's been a delight.
Thank you, Kate. Always fun to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please help me grow the podcast by subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with anyone you think would benefit from hearing it too. Your support means the world to me. If you'd like to get updates about new episodes, posts, and offerings, please visit settlingisbullshit.com to subscribe to my newsletter. You can also find information there about working with me one-on-one to build your most amazing life. Until next time, remember that I believe in you and that you are fucking awesome.